Thank you.
Excellent.
So there seems to be a change in order. I was asked to speak about relapsed refractory Hodgkin's lymphoma, where transplant is not an option. Since transplant is supposed to be the standard of care for most patients with relapsed refractory Hodgkin's disease, I thought that this is likely to be a very, very difficult task to convince you that this is not an option. However, my job has been made slightly simpler by presentation of Dr. Rishi, where he's told you about the newer drugs and the fact that Dr. Fayad's presentation is not available as of now. So what is current standard of care? We say that if somebody has relapsed, and if somebody is relapsed within the first year, autologous transplantation would be the best choice for these individuals. But my argument is that standard of care keep on shifting as you get new treatment options and as you have newer things coming up and if we understand the disease better. And therefore, maybe that current standard of care should change with what we have in pipeline. The next question that we need to answer is the current standard of care enough? And we will take that up. And finally, we have to understand whether sticking to current standard of care is detrimental to a subset of the patients with Hodgkin's disease. And perhaps you people know that there is something called devil's advocate. When you start to canonize somebody, a person argues against that canonization. So we are sort of canonizing autologous stem cell transplantation, and I've been given the job of being devil's advocate today. All of us know that over a period of time, the response rates in Hodgkin's disease have really been a kind of a success story. From the early 1960s to now, 2000, we now, as you were told, have patients who would be cured of the disease in about 80%, or maybe in advanced stage in about 70% situations. However, the problem that we have is that when we have most patients who are being cured, current emphasis is on concern about long-term effects of chemotherapy, and people are actually trying to find out how do you reduce those effects rather than talk in terms of increasing cures. 10 to 15% of patients with localized Hodgkin's and about 25 to 30 with disseminated classical Hodgkin's fail to respond or relapse after primary chemotherapy / radiotherapy. Now, this group has variable treatment outcomes when you treat them second time. I believe the groups are absolutely heterogeneous, and second line is curative in only 50% of them. The groups, as you can understand, are what we call primary progressive disease, where there is no effect of the treatment, an early relapse that occurs within 12 months, a late relapse that occurs after 12 months, and the relapse could either be limited or it could be generalized. Now, primary refractory disease is defined as disease regression of less than 50% after 4 to 6 cycles of anthracycline-based chemotherapy, or disease progression during the induction treatment, or disease progression within 90 days after the end of first-line treatment. Now, we must understand that in all studies, patients with refractory disease had poorer outcomes than those who had achieved complete response, and that thereby meaning those who had relapsed Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the long-term cure rates in this setting is below 30%, despite whatever you may do. The current standard of care as ASCT was established after 2 randomized trials were published, and one of them was published in Lancet way back in 2002, where they compared people who were given Dexabeam and then were randomized to either receive stem cell transplantation or further courses of chemotherapy. And Schmidt et al. Reported that there was a significant advantage with autologous HSCT in relapsed Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they established it as a standard of care. And most of it was in terms of progression-free survival that was seen in these patients. What I want to bring to your notice is, what about the fine print in this study? And if you look carefully, and if you look at patients with early relapse, then whether you gave chemotherapy or you used stem cell transplant, the results were not different in overall survival. Similarly, when you had individuals with multiple relapses, the results were not really very, very different. Thereby meaning that autologous transplant failed to improve survival in early relapse and multiple relapse patients. There was a trend to improved survival in late relapsers only. Most studies actually exclude chemorefractory patients, and therefore there is very little data on chemorefractory patients and autologous transplantation. And finally, if you go by these trends, then it's possible that transplant is highly unlikely to benefit primary refractory disease. It is not true, it's not only that the data looked at the time of first publication, but when the study was actually presented again 7 years later, and now you talk of chemosensitive disease with an autologous stem cell transplantation. It was in JCO, and you can see that there was no difference at 7 years in terms of overall survival. So I do not know, if you do not have any difference in overall survival, why would you stick to a form of treatment? Again, as I made a point earlier, after an autologous transplantation, the response rates are clearly dependent upon the time to relapse, thereby meaning that if time to relapse was more than 12 months, people did very well, but if it was less than that, then people did not really do well, thereby meaning overall survival is highly dependent on time to relapse. If you had patients who did not respond to treatment and you actually use a salvage chemotherapy, there is recent data which suggests that patients who require a second salvage regimen to achieve disease control prior to autologous stem cell transplantation have a relatively poorer outcome and should be considered for alternative treatment and should not go for autologous stem cell transplantation. Look at another subset of patients. If you have a relapse which is localized and not at the previous site, then there is data which suggests that if you used salvage radiotherapy in these situations, these people might do very well. If you look at the CRs, they are 77%, the PRs are 4%, and they are almost as good or maybe better than the results that were achieved with ASCT. So where does this lead us to? It means that patients who have asymptomatic isolated site relapse, or those who are late relapsers, or those who have primary progressive disease are unlikely to benefit by ASCT. And it is of questionable value in individuals who have early relapses. It's also of questionable value in poor responses to salvage chemotherapy or relapses after autologous stem cell transplantation. Thereby meaning that even though it is standard of the care, to my mind, it's a fairly unsatisfactory state of affairs. So once we are there, where do we go from here? We could remain satisfied with current standard of care and continue to practice it, or we could think of new drugs and explore new drug combinations. And Dr. Ritchie has told you a lot about new drugs and drug combinations. It would only be a repetition of what he said, that you could talk about brentuximab, you could talk about penabinostat, everolimus, lenalidomide, and several other drugs which are in the pipeline. But of them, to my mind, SGN-35 or brentuximab is the most important drug, predominantly because after gemcitabine, this is the drug that has got the highest rates of single agent responsiveness in patients with Hodgkin's disease. This is just a cartoon that I borrowed from an EHA presentation, and it only tells you as to how does it work, because it is an antibody-drug conjugate. So antibody binds to the receptor site, it is internalized, and then the conjugate actually is responsible for disrupting the microtubule network and causing the cell death. So these studies have been talked about, but I would really like to bring you back to these again, that in chemorefractory transplant-ineligible patients or who refuse transplant, 20 of them, brentuximab alone given every 3 weeks, the overall response rates were 30%, and these patients had CRs of 10%. That is something that would not happen with any other form of treatment, and so the results are very interesting. In this multinational open-label phase 2 study with relapsed or refractory Hodgkin's lymphoma or autologous stem cell transplantation of 102 patients, the overall response rates were 75%. This has been shown to you actually. And the complete response rates were 34% with modest kinds of toxicity. So if you had this kind of a drug, why would you not actually use it? And this graph has been shown to you. The yellow ones actually show you a complete response by PET. This has also been talked about by Dr. Ritchie, and this is safety and efficacy of brentuximab vedotin for Hodgkin's lymphoma that recurred after allogeneic stem cell transplantation. And what is interesting is that these patients have a progression-free survival for which median has not actually been attained. And even in this heavily transplanted patients, overall survival is fairly good. And similarly, the other thing that it shows is that people who have CR actually do very well. And therefore, you can have a subset of patients who would do very well over a period of time. So there are several other trials which are examining the use of brentuximab vedotin in frontline combination regimens, as well as in salvage therapy. What has been shown is that if you use it with bleomycin, then pulmonary toxicity may be high, and therefore there might have to be some changes in the frontline regimens if you want to use brentuximab upfront. These studies will help to clarify the optimal use of brentuximab in treatment paradigm of Hodgkin's lymphoma, and combination chemotherapy might even replace the role of HSCT in primary refractory and early Hodgkin's lymphoma. That is not my opinion. You look at the NCCN revised guidelines, and they now say that they have included brentuximab vedotin as an option for patients with progressive disease after high-dose therapy or the stem cell, autologous stem cell replacement, or at least 2 prior chemotherapy regimens for all patients regardless of their eligibility. Therefore, I think this is a drug that is likely to be used more and more. Penabinostat has been talked about. I think the data has already been shown to you, and it seems that it has an in vitro synergism with everolimus, and maybe combinations would be of use. Now, a combination of these new novel agents might actually be very interesting, and this is a heading from an editorial that appeared in June 2012, which says, can they make one of medical oncology's chemotherapy success stories more successful, thereby meaning you don't really require a transplant. So I wanted to be very provocative because I did not have as much data as you would have on autologous stem cell transplantation. And I believe we have a choice. We could follow a well-trodden path like most of us would do, thereby follow the guidelines, or break new grounds, like Dr. Fayyad is actually doing, though he's going to speak for the other side today. And if you break new ground, then leaders are remembered over a period of time, whereas others like us fall by the wayside. Thank you very much.